are these people?
You ready for our next one?
I am ready for the next one. So this is a story. This is another Twitter drops gems every once in a while. So obviously we know that Israel has its in the Middle East and in our region of the world, but we don't think about how, if at all, how Israel has his bloody hands on Africa as well. Honestly, and to be very transparent, I don't think of this at all, but this might be something I want to maybe look into more because I think the implications, of Israel in terms of the wars that have occurred, in Africa, and it's more recently too. And we'll get more into that in a minute, and then how Israel is kind of responding to African refugees coming into their borders. You can kind of guess where this might be going.
Yeah.
I saw this tweet early in the week, so I have to catch up, I guess, to where you are. So this is a tweet that I saw from Shahila Patel, and she wrote, Susan Abdulhala, world's best Palestinian author, had her account here banned after a Zionist hate campaign. Please read and RT this thread by her. Zionists are pushing a new line of propaganda aimed at breaking Black solidarity with Palestinians. So when I saw that, I was like, ooh, sounds interesting. So she continues. The narrative goes something like this. The only reason Palestinians are getting attention is because they are not Black, which is not true because Palestinian society is multiracial. Just look at the millions killed in the DRC. Look at Sudan. Look at Tigray.
Yep.
So I want to point out that, in fact, Israel is at the heart of the genocide in the DRC. Israel has been arming and training militias in Rwanda and Uganda to maintain the violent chaos that facilitates Western mineral extraction from Congo's mines. The M23 militia is the primary culprit for the devastation in the DRC. They receive surveillance software, military hardware, funds, and training from various Western states, and especially Israel. Furthermore, Israel not only cheered for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected president of Congo, but they helped prevent bringing his murders to justice. Israel helped maintain the horrifically oppressive rule of Mobutu Sese Seko for decades. A contingent of Israeli armed and trained paratroopers were the backbone of Mobutu's suppression throughout Congo. Dig deeper into any atrocity across Africa and you will find Israel. From the Rwandan genocide, Israeli arms dealers boasted about supplying weapons to Hutus, to the genocidal diamond extraction service industry, or any other extractives in Africa. It's fine if folks don't want to speak up for Palestinians. It's a whole nother level to go on social media to explain why others shouldn't either, at the hour when the equivalent of 2 atomic bombs have been dropped on the most densely populated place on Earth.
Yep.
Sadly, people think solidarity is a zero-sum game. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. What's also interesting is that a lot of folks bringing up the DRC themselves had never said a word about it before. For the record, I have. So going into this a little bit more, and it's kind of not a pet project, but personal to me since I lived in Uganda and I had, a close friend, one of my close friends, Ronnie Kadala, is there. I actually interviewed him last year. You could check the channel for the interview that I did with him. We talked about the Rwandan genocide. So this article actually came from the time back in 2016, where Judah Ari Gross reports that records of Israeli arms sales during Rwanda genocide to remain sealed.
Of course.
Supreme Court denies attorney's petition to exports to the African country, citing risks to national security and foreign relations. So Judah continues, records documenting Israel's arms sales to Rwanda during the night there will be sealed and concealed from the public, the Supreme Court decided this week. So this is in Israel, just to clarify. Activist attorney Ate Mack filed in 2014 a request with the Defense Ministry for the information on the defense exports to the African country. It was denied by a Tel Aviv court, and the case was moved up the appellate system in the ensuing year and a half, culminating in Monday's decision. Mack argued that there was a major public interest in having the information revealed, and that preventing its disclosure created a feeling that the respondents were preventing it due to extraneous consideration, according to the court's decision. Supreme Court President Miriam Naor, Justice Neil Hendel, and Justice Kizak Amrit determined that despite the public's right to know, there were pressing security and foreign relations concerns that prevented them from accepting the appeal. Gee, I wonder if that has anything to connect it to America. More than likely, I would imagine.
It's very possible.
I continue. The justices cite Section 9 of Israel's Freedom of Information Act,
which is an oxymoron.
Which allows the government to withhold documents if, in the disclosure of the information, there is concern over harming national security.
I mean, I made a joke, but like it is like directly oxymoronic. It's like the Freedom of Information Act, the very next sentence, which allows the government to withhold information.
Withhold documents.
Yeah,
right.
like okay. They took their ideas from us, obviously, about how to name shit. So,
in the disclosure of the information, there is a concern over harming national security, its foreign relations, the security of its public, or the security or well-being of an individual. So basically, we can withhold anything that condemns us in any. This is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah.
The state's evidence and rationale behind keeping the information sealed was presented behind closed doors, of course. However, it was based only off of relevant considerations according to the court's decision. In Israeli law, there is no legal right that it's absolute, and even the right to information is permitted to be passed over in light of other protected interests, the justices ruled. However, this is not a blanket ruling, they added. It is possible that the strength of the public interest to have the information revealed will exceed the strength of the concerns over the interests listed in Section 9. Sure.
In words, times to Israel.
In a statement following the hearing, Matt called the decision erroneous and immoral.
Okay.
The state of Israel only loses from it, he said.
Do they now?
Did, however, what's that?
Do they now? Like,
yeah. Mack did, however, applaud the court for recognizing the 1994 something the lower courts had refused to do.
Yep.
Over the course of 100 days, an estimated 750,000 to 1 million Tutsis were brutally killed, largely with machetes and other simple weapons. The exact number of victims has been difficult to determine as no official records were kept of the massacre.
Y'all seen the movie, though?
Yes, Hotel Rwanda, which actually, I will say this, a lot of Rwanda, well, actually, have a problem with it. Well, it's Hollywood, so, probably should be worth trying to get either Ronnie or Peter to come back on again and talk about this a bit more. Yeah, maybe we could do that next year. During their mourning period. But anyway, some of the weapons used allegedly included Israeli-made 5.56 millimeter bullets, grenades, and rifles.
Yeah, Galils, I think, too, were moved over there. Everyone's favorite. So IDF makes lots of weapons for people. So,
yes.
Whatever.
That's really the whole point. It's just like, you know, we get weapons from IDF, well, here in the States as well as in Africa. Well, the idea of the militarized police thing under Obama, this came from IDF. So, so as I said, like Israel has its hands, the bloody hands all over the damn continent and the world in terms of
and Ukraine
military.
and
Yes.
like,
However, the official documentation of those sales and their extent will remain close to public eyes in light of Monday's decision.
yeah, except we all know already. So it's like,
Right.
the hell's the point? And the point is that it's probably a lot worse than what we know. That's why they're keeping it
Probably
under wraps.
Yeah. I work to strengthen the public oversight on defense exports, he told the Times of Israel last year. Besides filing FOIA requests, Mac has also worked with Merkez MK Tamar Zandberg to prevent Israeli arms sales to South Sudan. Sandberg also proposed a law that would forbid defense exports to countries that commit gross violations of human rights. The law failed to pass in the Knesset. So yeah, that, I mean, not surprising. So this is the first part in terms of, how Israel funds weapons to Africa. So obviously, with weapons there comes, militias.
Malicious intent. Yes.
Malicious intent, militias get at it.
Yep.
And Africans, kind of what we're seeing now, Palestinians having to leave Gaza, Africans having to leave, their countries, and obviously one of the places that they try to go to is Israel, and basically Israel is saying, fuck no, you can't stay here. So Israel is the cause of all of this, and to kind of resolve the issues either. And obviously that you can probably guess there's a lot of racial overtones to this. So I pulled a badge to obtain segment from the Real News that kind of talks about this a little bit more. I probably have to read some of it because the subtitles is in another language, so I'll read those subtitles. But it will give you an idea of the extent of how these arms sales, have infiltrated African, communities to where refugees are seeking asylum in Israel, and they're not necessarily being helped.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The latest development in the story of Israel's scandalous treatment of African asylum seekers was revealed last week. After denying to even examine most of the refugees' asylum claims, deporting and imprisoning those who stayed, Israeli authorities are now coercing them to sign on to so-called voluntary return as part of Israel's arms and trade deal with several African nations. Asaf Itzan is an Israeli lawyer who works with asylum seekers trying to prevent their indefinite imprisonment and deportation.
כן, תראי, מדובר היום על כ-50,000, שהרוב המכריע שלהם, למעלה מ-90% הוא מאריתריאה ומסודן, בעיקר מאריתריאה. האנשים האלו, שוב,
so go back a second, so I have to read this part for friends who probably are not seeing
asylum seekers trying to prevent their indefinite imprisonment and deportation.
Today we're talking about roughly 50,000, 90% of whom were from Eritrea and Sudan, mostly from Eritrea. Abroad, their asylum claims are recognized at about 80%. In Israel, 0%, or almost 0%. No one's coming in anymore. An impressive fence was built on the southern border, and almost no new refugees are coming in. We're talking 0 to 10 a month. Only a few months ago, The Supreme Court canceled the anti-infiltration law amendment, so the government simply passed an even worse law. What legal avenues are open for refugees to fight for their rights in Israel? Look, there are silent claims. Oh,
I can back it up slightly.
yeah, that's a little fast. Go ahead. Look, their silent claims aren't even looked at. And when they are, they're refused. No Sudanese had their refugee status recognized. 2 Eritreans out of 10,000 had their refugee status recognized. The situation is really terrible.
My name is Musa Kiso. I come from Sudan, therefore. We want for Israeli government to cancel the new infiltration law. We want the international government and the UN to stand with us and put pressure on the Israeli government to change its policy. Because since we come here, the Israeli government is changing its policies towards the refugees community here in Israel, and by passing a new amendment in 10th of December, where it is allowing to send thousands of the refugees to detention center.
Even the UN body responsible for refugees, which has proven to be politically impotent, took a stand. Before quitting his position as head of the UNHCR offices in Israel, William Tall finally agreed to speak out, saying, as UN High Commissioner, we have access to the prison and we heard what the state offered them. Agreement to return under an ultimatum of jail can't be considered voluntary by any criterion. It is explicitly not a voluntary return. Tamar Avia is a long-term activist who worked tirelessly with African refugees and was one of the few Israelis to help in the recent protest and strike against the government's policies.
One of the main tools that the government is using also to induce the panic within the community and to make life just impossible to survive is to close down refugee businesses. This is sometimes with and sometimes without any relation to the legality or validity of their visas. The immigration police started making mass arrests on the street. This spread a lot of panic in the street. They were just making arbitrary arrests, didn't matter what kind of paper you had. And there were a lot of rumors going on. The next week, the Ministry of Interior offices where the asylum seekers come to renew their temporary visa. This is usually 30-day visa, sometimes 2 months, sometimes 3 months. These offices started closing, stopped giving service, sometimes open, sometimes not open. But the great success of the government strategy is the massive voluntary return.
According to UNHCR statistics, more than 80% of refugees remain in the region of the countries they flee. While the Israeli right wing portrays the refugees as a serious demographic threat, they make up less than 0.4% of the population under Israel's control. In comparison, the city of London has 5 times the number of asylum seekers of Israel.
Why is Israel against resettling these refugees to other countries if it wants to get rid of them?
Well, Israel wants to get rid of refugees, but it doesn't want refugees to get a good solution, because then that would give African refugees an incentive to come to Israel as a stepping stone on the way to in a European or Canadian or American country or any other country where their human rights would be respected as refugees.
Because of the security situation in Eritrea and North Sudan, Israel cannot legally deport the refugees there. It's therefore encouraging them to leave on their own, either to Sudan or other African states. Speculations began this summer when, after a long campaign of persuasion, Israeli representatives tried to secure the destination, offering various sub-Saharan states arms and trade deals. Last week, it was finally revealed that the refugees are being sent to Rwanda and Uganda, and potentially also to Kenya.
Uganda will also allow migrants to use its territory as a transit point to return to their home countries or go elsewhere. In return for the favor, Uganda has been promised to be furnished with an undisclosed sum of money and military equipment.
This effort predates even the previous governments of current Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In 2008, then Prime Minister Ehud Olmert offered to pay various African nations $1,000 to $1,500 per refugee. The Israeli financial daily Globes reported in June 2008 that the decision was made to try and sell the refugees to African countries.
Oh, God,
Following the decision...
that's... What?
Yes.
Like that, there's another name for that. Like it happened before. There was a whole trade based around it.
Right.
So, you know, like I guess they get a better boat this time, or, you know, like, okay. I mean, this is obviously why you see some of the African countries be dog shit on this, right? Like,
right.
Because they're getting military aid.
Right.
Bad cookies in the chat. Sell refugees, like as in slavery. Well, yeah, kind of. Like,
yes.
Only a little. Only like it. Well, it's not. Slavery is a strong word.
The Foreign Ministry turned to every African nation with which Israel has diplomatic relations, including Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, the Ivory Coast, and Benin, and offered to pay for taking in the thousands of refugees who came to Israel. While during Olmert's leadership the African states refused, Netanyahu made them a better offer. In 2009, Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman visited several African states, including Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya, with an entourage of arms dealers. While no deal was signed on the trip, his deputy, Dania Elon, continued the visits. Then, in 2012, Netanyahu appointed a special envoy, former Mossad agent Chagai Hadass, who was a key negotiator in the release of captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Hadass made a number of undisclosed trips, this time offering $8,000 per refugee and a trade package including agricultural training, technology, and arms. When the Israeli daily Haaretz succeeded in lifting a gag order on the deal in August last year, it was revealed that the country to which the government intends to ship the asylum seekers was indeed Uganda. This week, Haaretz revealed some refugees are also finding themselves in Rwanda.
They're a currency, one of many currencies in Israel's economic interest in arms trade in Africa and also its colonial interests.
ההסכמים לא נחשפו מעולם, זה מבחינת נפסות מדינה.
Never brought to light.
Yep.
We had no idea what rights returners get.
אין לנו מושג מה הזכויות שאנשים מקבלים. יש לנו דיווחים שאנשים
We have reports of people who found themselves in Uganda and Rwanda.
אוגנדה ורואנדה ונלקח מהם, הם לא קיבלו שום שהייה, שום ויזה, שום כמובן סטטוס, ולא נבחנה בקשת המצד שלהם, והפכו להיות חסרי מעמד, ודברים חמורים.
The situation is very serious.
S is an Eritrean refugee who made his way to Israel from years in Sudanese refugee camps. Following the coerced effort to get him to leave the country, he decided to sign the agreement and go. For fear of imprisonment, were he to find himself back in Eritrea, he refused to be filmed.
نحن عينو خشبين شان نحن بني آدم لكن قبل ما تشيغانو لما دنا تسرادو دانو
شان we're worthless.
Yeah. We thought we were human beings.
Yeah,
we came to Israel and found out we're worthless.
Us black people are not human beings here. That's all I can say. So I'd rather go back to Uganda, at least they're black too. But you know what many who sign on to go to Uganda and when they land they find themselves in Sudan? They leave us without a choice. We have no choice. Out here, the government, the people, the laws, it's really not the same Israel as when we came. They call us ninjas and cancer. If I had a citizenship to anywhere, but I have no citizenship, what would you do if you returned to Eritrea? I fled the mandatory 18-year-long army service. Either put me in jail for life or kill me.
We know that when the flight goes down, their names are called out by the Khartoum police. So they are expected by the Khartoum police. Everything they have on them is confiscated. Okay, they're taken into interrogation, sometimes for a day, sometimes for several days or a week. And from there, there are two options. Either they are released under limiting conditions. They may not leave Khartoum, so their movement is limited. They have a police file. Sometimes their whole family has a police file. They have to report to the police either daily or once a week. Many of them are put under pressure to become informers for the police.
Oh, there's no sound.
Because they're in a vulnerable position. All of them, all of the passports are stamped with the council, so they can't use their passport anymore. They will not be able to leave Sudan with the passport. These are the ones that are released, and they are the ones that are probably in jail.
Since the interview, the Organization of Sudanese Refugees in Israel recorded 13 deaths of returnees who were tortured when nearly 1,000 remain in jail in Khartoum. According to international standards and law, if refugees decide to voluntarily return to their countries of origin, the host country, in this case Israel, ought to provide them with comprehensive legal and return counseling, information, sufficient time to prepare, reintegration support, assist in their ability to find housing, employment, healthcare, and education, monitor their return, and so on. Instead, the returnees report that once they've landed, often not knowing to which country they're even being sent to, they have no contact with any official representatives from Israel or the country to which they were sent after their arrival, and no one assists them or deals with their needs. The government's response was that all actions are taken in accordance with international law. For the Real News, I'm Leah Tarachansky in Tel Aviv.
So in short, Israel funds armed weapons to these countries. Fighting erupts. Refugees try to land in Israel, as they said, as a stepping stone to the West. Israel's like, fuck no. Are essentially used as currency to these countries in exchange for more arms. Lather, rinse, repeat.
Right.
It's essentially what it is. So
you brought this from Africa Stream?
Well, Africa Stream, but this actually is a documentary that was produced by Max Blumenthal and David Sheen. This was produced in 2013. So kind of going off of this kind of talks about the racism that African migrants experience when they get to Israel. So this is short, but but what you'll see will kind of sum up, the news clip that we just put. Go ahead.
Since 2006, about 60,000 Africans have arrived in Israel on harrowing treks through the Sinai Desert, fleeing poverty, persecution, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. As refugee camps across Africa fill up and Europe closes its gates to asylum seekers, Israel became the next best option, accessible by land and said to be a developed democracy. But instead of providing them with safe haven, Israel is both refusing to grant them any benefits and denying them the ability to work legally to support themselves. Faced with poverty and exploitation, a new nightmare unfolded.
עדיין לא מאוחר, אפשר מחר לעשות מעשה, להתחיל... Start rounding up the infiltrators. Oh, sorry.
You good?
Start rounding up the infiltrators. Don't need to wait for the Supreme Court. We don't need to wait for anything. Round them up tomorrow morning. Outside my house, I see shit, fit, and psychopaths just waiting for the chance to murder me. You can see me, but nobody believes us. You're racist. You're racist because you want to preserve our lives and our sanity. I'm proud to be a racist and our rights. If I'm a racist in order to preserve my life, then I'm proud.
While protests raged in the streets against the presence of asylum seekers from Africa, the man who held the power to determine their fate, Deputy Prime Minister Eli Yishai, demanded their expulsion.
אם ייתנו לי את כל הכלים, ואני פועל להשיג את כל הכלים, וזה לא קל. אם ייתנו לי את כל הכלים בלי יוצא מן הכלל, תוך פחות משנה...
No, it's just really fast. If they grant me all the tools with exception, in less than a year, not a single infiltrated state of Israel.
And the few isolated Israelis who dared to protest, like this woman, were met with a harsh backlash.
You can keep going. Okay.
They called for someone to be raped in there. Who are you married to? Yeah, I'll stick a pole up your ass. Yeah, great people.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's not just the Middle East that Israel has. Again, this is kind of hidden history. I don't think, like, obviously we've talked about the genocide on this, the Rwandan genocide on this show, but like the implications of Israel, I never knew that it makes sense, but didn't think that Israel would have any implications in this, and obviously now they're the cause of the problem, and now Africa were trying to go into the country to seek asylum, and basically they were given a hard time with racism and whatever means, and they're basically being sold off to other countries for profit. So yeah, as you said, it's basically slavery 2.0, Israel version, basically. You're mute.
It reminds me of the Ukraine situation where, like, how they treated African refugees there. Mm-hmm. You know? So, like, and yet they act like everyone else is the immoral ones. It's just projection.
Right.
So,
right. So yeah, I mean, kind of going back to, you know, the tweets earlier, you know, and this is what I've been hearing, you know, especially from, like, I said this last week, and FBA's basically being like, oh, the issue with Israel, that has nothing to do with us. You know, and I should have put out this tweet, but I saw this tweet earlier, and you actually sent it to me earlier as well. I think we both looked at it at about the same time. Another Kwame Ture quote where it basically said, you know, as you guys know, Kwame Ture is from Trinidad. I'm half Trini myself, you know, and he makes the claim like, look, like the only difference between African Americans and Trinidadian, the ship came and just dropped me off in Trinidad and sent the rest of you all up to, you know, America or whatever, but we all came from the same place.
Yeah.
So the idea that, you know, certain Black people are saying, oh, this situation with Israel has nothing to do with us, I say you're dead wrong. and given, the implications, what's happening in Africa and how, Israel is essentially selling arms to Africans and selling arms to us, that, it's just all connect. So, as CJ Jonah says, internationalize the struggle.
Yeah.
This is an pure example of that. And a lot of this stuff is tied to Israel.
And it's all connected. Like the amount of arms, there's stuff with Pfizer and Moderna. There's a lot of money flowing out of that tiny little country. So,
Right.
You got to ask why, how it affects the world before you start doing any decision making there. But anyway,